Questions to the Prime Minister. Question number 1, Mr. Andrew Smith.
Number 1, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall be having further meetings later today.
Mr. Andrew Smith.
Does the Prime Minister accept responsibility for the chaos and confusion at the heart of government over the poll tax? Doesn't she owe it to this House and to the people before they vote on Thursday to give a straight answer to a straight question? What precisely is she going to do about the poll tax?
Mr. Speaker, had the honourable gentleman read the debate we had on it earlier this week, he would have known the answer. Yes, we are looking to see if any adjustments need to be made to the community charge for next year. Some of those were already indicated in the debate, and there's no surprise about it. When you go from a rate tax to a community charge, of course there will be adjustments to be made, and we're looking for which ones need to be made for next year. If there's any confusion or any high rates, it's in the minds of Labour local authorities. High community charges are due to local Labour councils, and I must say that most councils have got out their charges with both the rebates and the transitional relief upon them.
Sir Timothy Wood. Number 2.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Wood.
My right honourable friend agrees that it would be wrong for any local authority to cave in to threats of a politically motivated strike, particularly to secure the reinstatement of a leading member of class war who hailed the Trafalgar Square rioters as heroes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. I understand that Hackney suspended a person who hailed the Trafalgar Square rioters as heroes, and that then Nalgo threatened to go on strike, and so that in fact Hackney gave in. That tells us a lot about the people whom Hackney employ, a lot about Nalgo, and a lot about what life would be like under Labour. They did it.
Will Kinnock.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister tell us, is she or is she not going to introduce legislation to change the poll tax in this session of Parliament?
Mr. Speaker, when in fact we have a statement to make, we shall make it. And it will be far more detailed and far more thorough than any statement we have from the Right Honourable Gentleman about roof tax.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Prime Minister remember telling me just a few short weeks ago that she thought the community charge will be very popular? Does she still believe that? And if she does, why is she sending her ministers off in every direction, desperately searching for an escape route from the poll tax?
No, Mr. Speaker, the community charge is a much fairer charge than the old rates.
Order. Prime Minister.
And a far fairer charge than the alternative roof tax. I noticed that the Right Honourable Gentleman, when he gave an interview to the Independent, it says this on April the 21st. Mr. Kinnock.
Order. Well, the Prime Minister's been asked a question. She must be given a chance to answer.
Mr. Kinnock then gave a strong indication of his own thinking. He said, the tax base for rates was imputed rents. And that's one thing we can take into account now and bung into the computer. Does he not know the old computer adage? Does he not know the old computer saying, garbage in, garbage out?
Can't the Prime Minister understand what just about everybody in the country now understands. The poll tax will never be fair. It cannot be amended. It must be got rid of, even if it means that the Prime Minister goes down with her own flagship.
Mr. Speaker, can the right honourable gentleman not understand that domestic rates have been abolished? They were a most unfair tax, that the enemy is not the community charge, the enemy is high-spending Labour Council.
Emma Nicholson.
Prime Minister not agree that since 19 million people only paid the rates and 36 million people now pay towards community services, it is already infinitely fairer for over half the adult population.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is correct, and I notice that in a recent poll, over 70% of the people thought everyone should make some contribution to local authority spending. That is just precisely what community charge does, with more generous rebates of community charge than ever before, and generous rebates on transitional relief. A much fairer tax than either rates or roof tax.
Dr. David Owen.
Has the...
Order. Dr. David Owen.
Is banding of the poll tax one of the adjustments that the Prime Minister has in mind, or so that people can pay on the basis of their ability to pay? Or is the Prime Minister opposed to this in principle, or there are practical arguments, in which case perhaps she'd enumerate them to us?
Mr. Speaker, those who cannot afford to pay get very generous community charge rebates, far more generous than ever before. Some 9 million people benefit from them. Those who have a very sharp difference between the old rates and the community charge are eligible for transitional relief. That applies to some 7 million people. The people who don't get sufficient transitional relief live in high-spending Labour councils who cannot for their citizens, but are more anxious to dip their hands deeply into their citizens' pockets. People who are better off pay far more to local services because the taxpayer is the greatest contributor to local authority spending, and your top 10% of income earners pay 40% of the yield of income tax. They therefore pay far more for local services than the people in the bottom 10% of it.
Dame Peggy Fenner.
Number 3, sir.
I refer my honourable friend to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Peggy Fenner.
Will my right honourable friend, in the middle of her busy day, spare a moment to commend the Medway City Council for the lowest community charge in the county of Kent? And could she indicate to the House the 5 local authorities who have the worst educational record, the largest number of empty council houses, and the highest level of rent arrears?
Mr. Speaker, I gladly pay...
Order. No, the Prime Minister's been asked a question.
I gladly pay tribute...
Order. Very order. This kind of hilarity is very unseemly. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I gladly pay tribute to the efficient Conservative authority in Medway. With regard to my honourable friend's questions about the 5 worst education authorities and so on, I'm sure the House will be avidly waiting to hear the reply. The 5 councils with the worst education results are Knowsley, Waltham Forest, Barking, Newham and Sandwell. The 5 authorities which have most empty council houses are Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, Salford and Birmingham. Between them, these Labour authorities have over 20,000 empty houses. And the 5 authorities with the highest rent arrears, Mr. Speaker, are Southwark, Lambeth, Liverpool, Brent, Islington. Between them, these authorities are owed 86 million in uncollected rent.
John Cummings! Cummings! Mr. Cummings! I've called... Order. I've called Mr. John Cummings. Mr. Cummings, number 4.
Honourable gentleman, to the reply which I gave some moments ago.
Cummings!
Prime Minister aware of the many thousands of people in the United Kingdom who are being discriminated against because of a hostile interpretation of rules governing concessionary TV licenses for the elderly and the disabled. Although they live in identical circumstances, because of these regulations, they are being denied what is rightfully theirs. Perhaps in the twilight of the Prime Minister's premiership, will she now find it within her heart to instruct her ministers to give to the retired people concerned that which is equal and just?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not aware of any discrimination in interpreting the regulations. Interpreting them is a matter for the department concerned, and I'm sure that if people are entitled to receive that concessional licence, they will do so.
Mr. Harry Greenway.
Speaker, sir, is my right honourable friend aware that 6,000 people in Ealing have been sent a full community charge regardless of rebate applications, and the fact that they are pensioners or students entitled to pay only a fifth, that is to say £87 only, instead of being required to pay £435 by Ealing Labour Council, which will not process their rebate applications until after the local elections of next Thursday. Isn't that a wicked con trick by Labour again?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. I think most local authorities have been thoughtful enough of their residents to deduct the community charge relief from the bill and also to deduct the transitional relief so that they do not raise needless fears. That is naturally good administration. If there are any who have not done it, I believe it's bad administration and sheer lack of consideration for their own citizens.
Canavan.
The honourable gentleman to reply, which I gave some moments.
To Canavan.
Yeah, but does the Prime Minister recall those heady days when she herself described the poll tax as her flagship? Now that Thursday's election torpedo is fast approaching, despite the captain's apparent order to change course, does she recall the fate of another flagship called the Belgrano?
Well, I should thought the honourable gentleman could in fact have done really rather better than that. The community charge in Scotland, where it has been operative for some considerable time, this year far more councils are either holding the charge or reducing it. In fact, the accountability is at last beginning to work, as this year they know that they cannot blame increases onto anyone else except themselves. And the accountability in Scotland is now beginning to work.
Private notice question, Mr. Allen.